Welcome to On the Entrepreneur's Journey, where we explore how leaders build, scale, and evolve companies, and ultimately create businesses that can run and grow beyond them. Today, I'm joined by Marty Nyman, a seasoned CEO who has led growth transformation across 7 different industries, from Fortune 50 environments to smaller, high-potential companies. What makes Marty unique is his ability to step into complex situations, define strategy where it's unclear, and build organizations that can execute and scale. He is currently leading New Wave Design, a specialized defense technology company operating in the world of mission-critical systems, where the stakes are high, the sales cycles can stretch from 18 to 36 months, and navigating government contracts is a challenge that can overwhelm smaller, under-resourced companies. In this conversation, we unpack what it really takes to grow in that kind of environment, how to create strategic clarity, align a leadership team around a shared vision, and build a company that can compete and win despite long cycles and structural complexity. This is a conversation about strategy, leadership, and how to turn constraints into competitive advantage. So, welcome to the show, Marty.
It's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Good, good. So, you've had a long career, much of it in the C-suite, and you've gone from Fortune 50 companies, as I said, and now you're in more of an entrepreneurial environment. So what patterns have you seen as you go from the large to the small companies, and what are the challenges that you see in growing in a more sort of entrepreneurial setting?
Well, it's interesting. I would say the last 2/3 of my career, if they've had one thing in common, it's been around a growth mandate. And you mentioned my experience in working both in the Fortune 50 as well as the small mid cap. I would describe growth drivers in 2 categories. Sometimes they're event driven, in which there's something catalytic going on in an industry. And everyone in that space is struggling to try to get their share of what's coming in terms of that upside. A good example was when I was in telecommunications, when the deployment of broadband and transatlantic, transpacific broadband networks were being deployed. That was a catalytic event, and everything was, pedal to the metal, high growth, high speed, high risk type of environments.
Right.
There's also environments that are more steady state, in which it's more of a mature market, but there's still a need and a desire to grow share. And the growth profile, both of those dynamics, by the way, require both growth mechanics and a growth mindset. But how the work gets approached will vary. A good example, if you're in healthcare, is continued servicing of the member base in the different insured pools like Medicare and Medicaid and such. So every growth challenge has a slightly different complexion, but the mechanics are still vital to the growth of the organization.
Right, right. Well, certainly in the case of broadband, it kind of reminds me a little bit what's going on with AI, is that everybody is, trying, it's an arms race to build out the capacity and the fibers and everything else. And there's who knows really what the answer is going to be, and how much capital is going to be squandered at the end of the day when this is all said and done, which certainly was the case in the broadband space. So I guess, as you do grow a smaller company, what tends to be unique about that versus the greater resourced Fortune 50s that you've been running?
Yeah, with smaller organizations, what I've learned is that you've got to have your growth aspirations, and your growth execution has got to be size appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the challenges, you probably heard this from other interviews you've had, if you come from a corporate Fortune 500 background, a lot of times the biggest mistake that gets made is taking practices out of a Fortune 50 company and dragging them into a small cap company. You break things when you do that.
Yeah.
So, but that's not to say that you shouldn't be. These are best practices for a reason. So bringing some of these best practices into a smaller company is about making them size appropriate. So you may not have the level of 10 steps of rigor, but you still have 6. You certainly still have the institution of accountability. When you are instituting a growth mandate, a growth plan, you need to have high accountability. So
Hmm.
is everyone in the organization fully up for owning what they own in terms of the growth part of it? That doesn't change. I mean, it transitions very nicely into small cap companies. On the other hand, you've got to also use the lever of inspiration. You know, small companies desire to grow, but sometimes you've got to offer the encouragement and allow them to see it before they can actually experience it, and to know that it's possible to reach these growth objectives. It's just going to take hard work and time.
Yeah. Now, do you find that you need a different type of individual? In other words, um, I mean, in big companies, so many of the roles are so defined. It's so specialized.
Mhm.
Yet in smaller companies, you either can't afford it or it just hasn't been developed yet. So you have people sort of growing into their specialization rather than owning it, outright or being hired for it. So you have more of a generalist mentality. Is that what you're finding, that you have to find people that can do two or three things rather than just one?
I think it's a slight variation of that. I think the call out is relevant. A lot of people coming from corporate backgrounds are used to having staff
Right,
and other
right.
internal resources, and you don't have them here. On the other hand, when you step into a smaller construct, you've got to realize that their exposure, their worldview has been somewhat limited. So what I look for is they may not carry two hats, but I am looking for people who are highly curious and willing to learn.
Hmm.
If they're willing to say there's a new way of approaching this, or how do we solve this problem differently, and here are some techniques and practices, as long as they're willing to learn, good things happen from that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I find that you're exactly right. People who they have to be able to be willing to dig in because,
Mhm.
as you said, the resources aren't there, and probably a little more agile and facile,
Yeah.
and be willing to be a little bit out of their lane and be looking to solve things. So you come to New Wave Design, and you're looking at it. It's in the defense space. What initially attracted you to this opportunity as you looked over the landscape? I know you were kind of changing in transition,
Mhm.
and I'd love to hear what drew you to New Wave Design.
Great question. So by way of background, I'm a mechanical engineer undergrad. So I instinctively am biased towards companies that make stuff, first of all. But on top of that, technology based. I just love technology. You know, I love the challenge, especially when it's on the kind of cutting edge that we are on. And I hate that cliche, but it's true. When I looked at what this company is doing, for whom they're doing it for, and what I call the degree of difficulty. If you look at if the engineering degree of difficulty, remember our products are going into a mission computer that's sitting in the belly of an F-35 or an F-16 or an F-18. So it's in incredibly demanding environmental conditions, yet functionally it has to work. It's vital to the mission execution of the aircraft. When I put those two together, it's like what they're doing, how they're doing it, who they're doing it for, and also the ongoing evolution of the technology and what's happening. Oh, that's a great combination. How can I say no to that? I don't do well with idle industries. If an industry is just, you want to bring me in to, run something that's steady state, I'm not that interested. This is challenging.
Right, right. And yeah, I mean, mission critical, lives dependent on it, all kinds of things like that are certainly challenges. So you show up, you take the reins. Um, did you have a template for your first 100 days? I'm always interested to see how a new CEO comes in and takes the reins and what their approach is as they take over.
Mhm. Yeah, um, I'm getting better at it. And but one of the things
You've had some practice.
as in practice, um, the first place I start is the culture. And I really want to get a sense for where are people at in general, and in all regards. Do they like working here? Are they energized by the work? Are they optimistic about the future, or they're not? Every answer is an acceptable answer, but I need to understand that baseline first. Remember, there's a lot of things that ultimately I do need to know about the future and the growth and execution of the growth plan. But have to always start with where are we at this point in time? And that starts with just a lot of one-on-one conversations. You get better at just asking lots of questions, but with the intent to truly understand what is it that the people are telling you. So it first starts out with, getting a sense for the culture. And to me, that's vital. In parallel, I'm also looking very closely at the leadership team that's currently in place. Do we have the right people in the right roles and for all the right reasons? A lot of times small companies they fall victim to the fact that, well, this person was here, they've been there, this is, we gave them these responsibilities and they've done a good job, but are they really the right person long term? So you have to be objective about assessing the caliber and capability of your leadership team and do that somewhat clear-eyed. And then the third ultimately is going to be what is really what makes this business unique? What is the one or two things that we do that are so compelling that we will be able to create a really defensible advantage and grow the business? If these things I put that to get composite together probably in the first 90 days. And I'll tell you, I see it probably after the first 45, I refine it for the next 45.
Hmm. Hmm. So I love that you start with culture first. And oftentimes coming into a middle market company, sometimes the core values and the culture aren't defined, and maybe the vision isn't there either. And so, did you find you had to reset that in this instance, the core values, or was there an operating culture here that really drew you to it, to the company?
I would say the values were in place. And I'll tell you, broadly stated from my experience, you can't ignore your values. But the work of making them really, really institutionally embedded is hard work. So
Yes.
just the fact that they exist is good. And I believe in the values that the company has honor who we are. There's still work to be done. How do we really institutionalize those values in such a way that becomes second nature? That's the work that continues, but I expect that in most organizations.
Hmm.
The vision did need to get a revisit. Um, I don't know about your listeners, but most vision statements are really just statements of the executional operational growth goals of the business. To be the number one provider of, dog sleds in Alaska. Um, that's not a vision. And the vision definition that I've always held to is, what does the world look like when you're ultimately successful? I mean, a good vision has to be audacious. It has to be aspirational. It doesn't have to be time bound, but it's about what the greater vision of what the future looks like when we're successful. And so there was some work that had to go into that with myself and the leadership team to say, what do we really want it to be?
Hmm.
And I like where we are right now. Um, and it's an ongoing body of work, to be sure. Because remember, the job of establishing a vision is it doesn't just exist for the break room wall. You need to be able to articulate it and then pull it back into what it is they were doing every day. And
Right.
it's not easy. How do what we do in tomorrow's production review meeting line up in support of our vision?
Hmm.
How does the product roadmap discussions that we're going to be having, how do we ensure that those are lined up against the future direction of where this company is going? That's the work that continues ahead of us.
Right. Right. And that's what, frankly, you're going to hire people that embrace that vision and want to be part of it, and hopefully are galvanized by it, so that they come into work excited. So that's important.
Yeah. And
Um,
one quick thing, Peter, what just best practice, what we do every time when new employees hired, when we do the new assimilation, the first day in the job,
mhm.
we after coffee and donuts, we walk them through these very things. What's our values? What do they actually look like? What do we honor and hold true? And then what is our vision? What does it really mean? It's so vital to see that on the first day. It's in the first 2 hours of them being in the company. They get an understanding of where we're going and what our vision is.
Yeah.
And it's a vital part of them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if it doesn't resonate, or if it doesn't, if you're crossways on those first 2 hours, that's not good. And hopefully, they've done enough research to know where they align and that they are aligned when they come in. So that's good. Um, you mentioned too when you came that as a result of that strategy and vision work, you really started to, look at your product line and say, we're not really aligned here, and so you said you really broadened your product line as a result of that work. So tell me what drove that decision.
There were really two things. One was, I would say, the current extension of what we do, and the other was a need to diversify the business. And I'll try to quickly break those down. We had a solid foundation of what we do from a product standpoint, and When I came into the company about that time, the market was making a shift, or I would say evolve. It wasn't pivoting, it's evolving to a next generation of a form factor that's used on these mission computers. And we really hadn't launched our first product. But the realization that that is where the industry is going, that's where the value gets created, that's where the demand is going to come from. So that was part of my role in that conversation, was to throw the full weight of our company behind that as a clear direction of our core product strategy, but then really start to aggressively invest in it. And in a tech business, you have to invest. It's a very, very capital intensive business from an R&D standpoint. So in that regard, we're fortunate now that our product portfolio has expanded considerably along that vector. In a parallel sense, one of the other things that I discerned in the first, I say 90 days, is we're good at what we do. We've got a great core market, but you know about diversifying risk in any business, you have to diversify your served markets.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the challenges that the team undertook was, where do we see diversification in the defense and aerospace industry right now? And that results in a new type of product. It's related, don't get me wrong, but it looks a lot different than what our core products look like. And that's where more diversification comes into play. That's going to be a separate growth trajectory for that product line, but it helps to bring diversification into our revenues, but it also takes some of that risk off the table. That if everything suddenly changed in your core business and you don't have a plan B, it's going to be a problem.
Right. Did you do that in terms of the platforms you were servicing, or was it a product for commercial use as opposed to defense, or was it, how did you diversify, and how did you know you were getting diversification?
It was more platform based.
Okay.
So you can characterize our business as a high diversity, low volume type of business. There's only 1,000, 1,200 F-35s in the world. So it's a very finite market. And within the defense ecosystem, there are other platforms that have a higher volume, and not the least of which is unmanned vehicles or uncrewed vehicles. That's one of the big growth opportunities.
Yes, that seems to be the way this thing is going. I mean, from what we're learning in Ukraine and certainly a little bit in Iran as well. Interesting. Okay. I wanted to, so presumably diversification and growth fueled those decisions, because if you could get into other markets, you'd be tapping into the growth rates in those situations. So what did you find on the management team side? Because I know you said that you had maybe some right people, but wrong seats, and that was part of your upfront analysis.
Yeah, I do a lot of observation, and I observe a couple things in every leader on our team. I look for confidence. Are they truly confident in their role and their ability to lead? And you have to lead confidently. You have to be confident in who you are, what your work there is to do, and how you inspire and motivate people. But I also look for skill fit. Is there a natural fit between their innate abilities and the work that has to be done? And as I've done with my other organizations and other roles, my first instinct is if I don't see an alignment on an individual or individuals, my instinct is not to jettison them from the team. My instinct is to find, is there a better role for them?
Yeah.
And typically what I do is I move people around. And it's for good reason. Continuity matters. You throw take somebody off the team, put somebody new in, you're going to have a new assimilation curve, and you got a potential disruption to have to contend with. But I also firmly believe in your job as a leader is to see to the growth of the people that work for you. And if I've got somebody who really just isn't right for the role, there's got to be a role that they will be fabulous at. You just need to help find it. And if you can find it here, then you have to mutually agree to say, okay, we're going to have to part ways. This just isn't the right place for you. So that's typically what I've done. And I've made a couple small changes with the leadership team here, and I'm very, very pleased. And I think the team we've got is a super high performing team with the right people, with the right gifts, skills, and experiences in the roles that they're in.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, you said it up front, the culture fit, if they have that, it just may be that, somebody's better suited over here than there, and to keep the continuity is a great thing. The other thing that I think is very interesting in your business, or challenging really, is the sales cycles are very long. The platforms come across, come around every 5 years, and then you have to build for them, do the R&D. So there's a lot of upfront cost in and before those first dollars come in, and then presumably as you get better at it and you start delivering it, the cash flow goes, starts to be positive, but that it requires a lot of investment up front. And I recall you said it's really kind of, it doesn't have had, you have not had outside capital, but how do you manage the cash flow implications of that type of sales cycle?
Fortunately, we're at a point in the business that we are able to cash flow operations. It would be a lot harder if that was not the case. And you have to balance resources, as with any business. You have to allocate capital in line with what your cash flows look like. And at our size, we've done a really good job of keeping that in check. Sometimes personally, I like to take some of my own personal values into play is that don't spend more than you have. So if you've got a budget, live by your budget. Spend only what you've been allocated to spend. And the team does a really good job. Very good. The word I've used with our team is all of you are stewards of the resources you've been given. So that's both people as well as equipment and capital. So you're right, the long sales cycle is challenging, and it's a test of your tenacity. But on the other hand, we've got a growing backlog of historical revenues that help support our ongoing day-to-day operations as well.
Yeah, it's funny. You have to have things in different parts of the product cycle so that you're flowing certain areas that allow you to invest in the others. And it sounds like you've got that mix, and because it's really a timing game, as
It
you
is.
look at it.
It is.
Okay. And the other thing that you and I spoke of and we touched on, was we talked about how you like to empower your leadership team and give them ownership and make them into mini CEOs. That was kind of, I think, the word you used. Tell me a little bit more about how you approach that and how you can let go. I mean, I know a lot of CEOs who can't, but you seem to be able to do that.
Thank you. I said it a moment earlier, my worldview on leadership is one of your most critical responsibilities is to see to people's growth. And if you are genuinely committed to doing that, you have to be willing to wade into that space, which is at times very uncomfortable. Things that get involved with this is sometimes you've got to ask a lot of questions as a way of them learning. In other words, people learn a heck of a lot more when they're asked as opposed to when they're told. So if I tell somebody how to do something, they might do it. Are they going to learn how to do it? The likelihood is fairly low. So in general, it takes a bit more effort and energy, but I try to institutionalize that with my leadership teams. Ask questions. Don't come right out and you may be wrong too. You think you know the situation, you may not be right. So you've got to give people the space to learn and grow, and that isn't always, if you're an impatient person, that doesn't always, work well. But you got to give them the time and the room and the space to grow. You also want to recognize that I want them to take risks. And you've got to talk about it. You've got to be open about the word and saying, okay, it sounds like you're kind of uncertain about this. This may not work out. Tell me what the worst thing is can happen. And if the worst thing that can happen is it doesn't go the way we thought it was, but we can pivot, we can recover, we can do something else. Great, let's do that. Take the risk. Let's go try something we haven't tried before. Otherwise, how will we know? And when you do that, when you give people the room to run, great things happen. And I've learned this stage of my career. I don't need to have the answers. And I love being around smart people who do. It just makes this job so much more rewarding.
Right, right. And I'm in the same position, I think, and when you try to impose a solution or even a way to do things, you know, uh, without getting somebody really giving them the ability to weigh in and buy into it or even create it for themselves, the outcomes are rarely as good, and the growth of the person certainly is not as great because they didn't have the time to devise their own way of doing it. And I think that's a very empowering thing, and does grow your people, and it allows you to have a team that's much less reliant on you, which is really what you want as
Yeah.
if you're the CEO. Um, That's great. So the next level of leadership in terms of growing your team and down the line, is that something that you're also working on? I know you got through the top layers, and have you pushed it down and gotten succession and all the things there that you're looking for?
That's a Remember what we talked about a few moments ago is when you take the best practices out of the Fortune 50 and you bring them into a small company. It's always interesting how that shows up and how you learn. And our human capital leader also comes from a similar corporate background, and so we have a lot of the same experiences in terms of best practices and succession planning and talent development and so on. What we've learned about succession planning in a company this size is you've got to continue to make it size appropriate. You just don't have the deep bench.
Right.
And where you had, in organizations of tens of thousands of people, you get to work through a much broader pool of candidates, and you can move people and develop people. Here's a different story. So we kind of iterate our talent development and our succession planning, and we have to acknowledge the fact that there are going to be some gaps in the plan. Just not that big. So what we then do is say, okay, if we do have the progression on succession, it's ready now, not yet, ready in 3 years kind of thing.
Right, right.
If we have a gap, then the next step is, okay, so let's make sure that we've got any risk mitigation applied to that. Should the current incumbent leave for whatever reason, do we have a backup plan that we can execute? And we put the energy into figuring out what do we need to do, who would be backfilling for them. And so it's good to have at least a comprehensive plan, but the one thing that is just noteworthy is the fact that at companies of our size, if any of your readers are similar size companies, plan for the appropriate gaps that you're going to have in your succession plan.
Yeah, yeah, and they are gonna exist, and you're gonna have to, next man up and ready or not. That's the way it is in smaller companies. So as you look forward, and it sounds like your diversification and was sort of an imperative that you felt the risk was you were too leveraged to certain defense platforms, and you did some diversification in the product line to lessen that. But as you look forward to the next 3 to 5 years, Marty, what's your view of, or where would you like the company to be 3 years from now?
3 years from now, we're going to probably be almost 3 times as large as we are today.
Wow.
It's ambitious, to be sure, and I wouldn't put that number out there if I didn't see the numbers that supported it. At this point in time, I looked at going outside of aerospace and defense. We did, I should say. Markets are there, but there's a lot that comes with if you want to go after different sectors. You need channels, you need a product, you need time, and the margin structure is probably going to be different. So for right now, I like where we are. Our core business, we're diversifying within the core, where we've got an incredible blue chip customer base. For a company our size, I always like to say this, that we punch so well above our weight.
Mm-hmm.
So we are serving, all of the defense primes, all the tier twos, all the neo primes that are coming up. So in that regard, we've got a good reputation, a good brand, a good product. What we needed to do is just now make sure that we've got the right product portfolio, the right strategy, the right approach, and then execute like crazy. And I feel really great about where we are right now. It's taken 3 years to get there, though. It's taken some time to get to this point.
Right, right. So, I always, one of the questions I always ask my clients is, do you have a viable sort of new design or next lane over or adjacent product, either outside or inside your current markets? And it seems like you chose to stay within your markets and maybe add on some adjacent products that would serve those markets that you, rather than go outside into different ones where there were different customers and which present a lot more risk, is probably what you concluded.
Yeah, well said. It's not that they don't exist, but I've also come to appreciate from hard lessons learned, just because the market exists doesn't mean you're going to have access to it. Doesn't mean you're going to get share. I mean, share growth in a crowded market is measured in single-digit share percentages. That's really hard.
Right.
And again, businesses these size, you got to be prudent with your trade-offs in terms of you only so much capital, where you want to spend it, get the best return. So I'm okay with that. No sense in going after something that's only going to burn through cash and end up yielding very little on the outcome side of it.
Right, right, right. Well, it's a very interesting business. Certainly, given the geopolitical situation we're in, it seems like it's a good position to be in with some good tailwinds. And we wish you luck in continuing to grow and work adjacently to in the space you're in and grow the company well. So I appreciate your time today, Marty. And until next time on the entrepreneur's journey, we will see you then. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Peter. Have a great day.